Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. And tonight we have a very special panel consisting of Jay Bonansinga. Did I pronounce that right?
Ah, that was beautiful. Better than my grandmother.
We got Mark, Simon, and Neil Cohen. Guys, thank you so much for joining me tonight. How are you all doing?
Doing
Oh,
well.
doing great.
I'm
Oh,
doing great.
Considering.
This is exciting.
it is exciting, and we're going to have some fun over the next hour. Now, you guys have all done different works. You're published, you work in different fields, but there's at least one thing that all three of you have in common, and that is your guys' work has involved The Walking Dead in one
Oh,
way or another.
I thought you were
Now,
going to say we're all old white guys.
now, I actually want to start off with Mark. Now, Mark, you do storyboarding. Before we get into that, can you just explain to our audience what storyboarding is and why is it so important?
Sure, and thanks for having me on. This is great. So storyboarding is, I look at it kind of like if you're going to build a house, you need blueprints so that everyone knows what house and what the house is supposed to look like and how many rooms and all that kind of stuff. Well, the storyboards are the blueprint of the director's vision that all people on the set need to refer to, so we're all working towards one vision. Because if you read a script and I read a script, we have different images in our head, but
Exactly.
only the director's image matters. So I dig into the director's head and I swim around in there and I draw everything that I see. And then that gets distributed to all the crew heads so that they can do all the budgeting and planning to make sure everyone gets everything done in enough time. Because there are times that some big stunt or special effect, what's on the page is not nearly as big as what's in the director's head.
Yeah.
So they can't budget and plan for it until they can see the visuals of the director's vision, and that's where I come in.
Okay, so you work with the director and I assume the director of photography as well.
Quite often, especially on the Walking Dead shows, the DP or director of photography is usually in there, and sometimes someone from effects or stunts will come in, but generally it's just going to be the director and the DP and I.
Now, in today's world, the year 2021, I'm assuming this is all done via computer graphics, or is it done the old school way of actually drawing it?
It's a mix. I mean, I'm drawing everything by hand, and it'll always be that way because computers can't work as fast as we can by hand. But I'm drawing directly into the computer. I'm
Wow.
drawing on a Wacom Cintiq, the monitor, the one I'm actually looking at right now. That the video's on it, and I draw right on the screen.
Now, you are currently working on Fear the Walking Dead. Is that accurate?
I am indeed. I start Tuesday on the next episode. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have been given a preview by the good folks at AMC of the first two episodes of Fear, which is phenomenal. We're not allowed to talk about it, obviously,
It.
but
Yeah, they're big. Yeah.
it's an amazing start to the season. And good friend Michael Satrazemis directed both those episodes. So
Yeah.
you and Michael have worked together often.
Yeah, on a number of things. I met Mikey on the original Walking Dead series.
Hmm.
He started as a DP on the original, or director of photography. Actually, as a
Actually, he actually
cameraman.
started as a camera operator.
Yeah, camera operator on the pilot
Hmm.
of The Walking Dead, and then worked his way up to DP, and then worked his way into directing and now producing. And so I worked with him when he was directing on the original show, and then he brought me in to Fear the Walking Dead.
Wow, that's awesome. Now,
Uh,
Jay, let's get over to you. You have written a ton of books. Uh, One, I believe, is called The Road to Woodbury and The Rise of the Governor. Tell us a little bit about them.
Well, The Rise of the Governor is the book I'm most proud of because it was the beginning of my uh, apprenticeship in the zombie apocalypse with Robert Kirkman, and it was an amazing experience. I mean, I felt like I was working my whole career up to this point. I had worked with George Romero. I love zombies. I I had written 10 books, mostly horror. I felt like I was really apprenticing to get to this point. And then Robert Kirkman, he didn't know me from Adam, but I think my agent got me the job because of the Romero connection.
Hmm.
But Kirkman in the beginning said, "Why don't you write 50 pages? Follow my outline, and we'll see the chunk. We'll look at your chunk." And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds like a good idea." And so I wrote 50 pages, and he looks at the 50 pages, and he has one change, which was he goes, that dude cannot have a tattoo because he's seeing naked from the waist up in the comic book in issue 13, frame 127."
That
And
is
I'm,
so cool.
"Is that it?" And,
Out of
and
50
he goes,
pages, one change? That's not
"Right."
bad.
And then he says, "Why don't you give me 100-page chunks?" And then I knew that this was going to work. This was the beginning of a beautiful friendship, because I gave him another 100-page chunk, and he's just like, "Why don't you just go ahead and finish the book?" And he learned to trust me enough to, after the first 4 books, which pretty much followed the comic. The comic was sort of our Rosetta Stone, but after the first 4, the final one was called The Fall of the Governor, Part 2, and was sort of the end of the governor's involvement in the novels and in the show.
Hmm.
And so then he said, people are going to just wonder about whatever happened to Woodbury. And so that became my charge. And he goes, you can come up with the stories. I'm not even going to put my name on the cover of the book anymore. You just write I had a contract for 4 more books, and it was pretty much what happens in Woodbury, after the
Wow.
governor's tenure.
And
So it was
that's entirely your vision.
well, it was, yeah, I mean, it was the most amazing experience I've ever had as a writer, because some of the work that I did became canon, and some of the characters that I came up with in the post Governor Woodbury saga, ended up in video games. They ended up in as canon in the Walking Dead ecosystem. So I am so proud of that, and I'm so fortunate that I
Absolutely.
wedged myself into that job.
And you got to work with Robert Kirkman, and I mean
Yeah.
that's just phenomenal. So Neil, me and Neil have met several times now at conventions. It's good to see you again, Neil.
Good to see
So
you.
you have written a series of books about The Walking Dead, the zombie apocalypse, and entrepreneurship. Now, for a lot of people, that's going to sound like a what part of this doesn't fit kind of a puzzle, and it's the entrepreneurship part. So, explain to us exactly what your books are about.
Well, and it's funny because one thing about everybody on this panel is we're all fans. We're all fans of The Walking Dead. And I was a fan of The Walking Dead before I wrote anything. And I remember going to Walking Dead cons and stalking Jay Bonansinga. And I remember standing in line waiting to get him to sign a book before I'd done anything. I was a fan. I had an idea of the type of zombie apocalypse that I thought was realistic, that I thought was where I always was worried when I saw these zombie apocalypse movies that there would be the eve, the fall, as they call it, the eve of the zombie apocalypse, and then it jumps a year later and there's no one left except for, cannibalistic strongmen psychos or ninja sword wielding zombie killers. I said, what happened to everybody else? Did we all just die out? Were we all gone in a year? And so in my series, we don't. Life goes on. The zombie apocalypse comes. The country doesn't fall. The government doesn't fall. We just kind of like COVID, like terrorism. We set new bureaucracies in place. We set new ways that we live our lives. Technology is put to use, and we go through life with just one more thing that could kill you: zombies. And so I wrote the trilogy, and in my third book, I actually have the first presidential election post-zombie apocalypse, and so it was very reminiscent of 2020, where we had a pandemic and a presidential election. So after going around and selling these books at the different cons and book shows, I would meet other fans, other zombie, Walking Dead, apocalyptic fans who were crafters, who were bakers, who were tour guides of where they filmed the different locations. And they all shared this passion for The Walking Dead. And they wanted to get into a business that allowed them to be more part of the Walking Dead universe. They wanted to be more than a fan. They wanted to come to these conferences, and they would ask me, how did you get on that other side of the booth? I'm walking around here like a fan, and I'm meeting stars, and I'm buying memorabilia, but how do I become on the other side and in the business of The Walking Dead? And I just had so many people come to me. I thought, well, that was kind of my real world. I'm a business development guy. I got my MBA in business, and when I did get my MBA, everybody said, well, Neil, when are you going to become an entrepreneur? And I said, well, when I find my passion, and it took me 12 years, but I found my passion, zombies. And I really realized that I wrote the books not so much to be an author, but I wanted to be part of this universe. I wanted to be in this world, and I contributed what I thought I could, and that was, I gave the impetus of Business is Dead, Resurrecting Entrepreneurship, about entrepreneurs who launched their business based on fandom of The Walking Dead.
So that's a sort of a how-to nonfiction type of book. Is that how you would categorize it?
It is. I give case studies of just over a dozen people who, some of which were serial entrepreneurs before that, some of which had a high school degree and never thought of starting a business, but came up with an idea and said, you know what, I am a fan of The Walking Dead. I want to communicate with other fans. I want to be part of this community. And some of them launched, like I said, bakeries. They started baking very cool cakes relevant to The Walking Dead and bringing them to the cons. And then they got hired by the cons and said, we want you to bake a cake for this celebrity, Walking Dead, that celebrity. Next thing you know, they launched a bakery based on The Walking Dead. One of the most interesting stories was a guy who was an auto mechanic, and he got laid off. And instead of just sitting around waiting for someone to give him another job, he went to some of the horror cons and looked at the props, the zombie arms, the heads, and said to some people, you know, where do you get this? And they said, oh, we buy it online. You know, it's expensive. He looked it up. He said, I can build this. He started building it in his garage. He started bringing it around to local haunted houses the following Halloween. They said, well, buy it off you. He put it on Facebook. Look at this arm I built in my garage. It looks like a zombie's arm. And next thing you know, he's getting orders online. And then he started getting commercial business, and he opened up a business. He was not an MBA. He was not even a college graduate. He was a high school guy who was a huge fan of The Walking Dead and found his niche.
Okay. Now, Jay and Mark obviously have ties with AMC. Jay has worked with Robert Kirkman. Mark works with AMC in the storyboarding. Do you have any official working relationship with AMC or The Walking Dead?
No.
Okay. Well, that
I've yet
leads
to
me.
be recognized.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Now, did AMC at least give their blessing? Do you directly use the name The Walking Dead in your books? Have you thought about any lashback or possible fallout from that?
Oh, sure, but listen, The Walking Dead is public domain. I talk about it. I'm not using anything that's copyright or proprietary. I'm talking about the show and the fandom of the show, what I call fantrepreneurs. But if AMC does want to come after me, they know how to find me. They haven't yet. The book's been out for about a year now, doing quite well. So, but listen, maybe they would like to buy me.
Well, you never know. You never know.
Yeah.
Now, Neil, is it true that you also have spoken with President Biden about the book Zombie Democracy?
I did. So I actually was at an event, and he was there. And like any self-promoting author, I always carry around my books in case I meet someone famous. And so I walked up to him. It was after the event. Now, he wasn't president at the point. Otherwise, I probably would have got tackled. But I just started talking to him about it. And I kind of thought he was going to be like, get the hell away from me. Who is this guy? We ended up talking for about half an hour about zombie democracy and, the plot line. So my 3 books started with Exit Zero. The second book was Nuke Jersey, and the third was Zombie Democracy, which follows the first presidential election post-zombie apocalypse. And I told him, what it was about and everything. And he said, you got to sign it for me? And I said, holy cow, absolutely.
That is so cool.
That's awesome.
Now, Mark, you not only work for The Walking Dead, you've done work storyboarding for Stranger Things and Netflix. Comparing the two experiences, 2 different studios, is there a big difference between the two?
Probably the biggest difference is timeline. Stranger Things shoots many, many, many more days per episode than any of the Walking Dead shows. The original Walking Dead show shoots everything in 8 days. Fear and World Beyond have 10 days.
Yeah.
And
that's actually it's because of the COVID that they've expanded from 8 to 10, I believe.
No, it was that way since they began.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Stranger Things is 22 per episode.
Wow.
So gigantic difference on how much time you've got. So there's more lead up time, more prep time because of that I can spend more time working on the storyboards. But other than that, my process of working with directors is the same. The fact that I'm a giant fan of both shows is the same. It's just time.
Now, how much, when it comes to either show, even other shows, I assume you get the script. So how far advance notice do you have to create the storyboards before it comes time for them to become reality and get put in front of a camera?
Not much. We don't get scripts really in advance before prepping. So, for instance, on Fear, like I said, we have 10 days of shooting, which means we have 10 days of prep. And within that 10 days of prep, they're finishing the script. So day 3 or 4 is when I'll get the script. And then about a day after that is when I'll have my first meeting with the director, and we go over the big stunt and effect scenes. We don't have time to storyboard the whole thing. It's just the really big elements that need to be done. That's the hardest to explain or plan without.
Yeah,
so,
like you mean like action sequences as opposed
big
to
action, zombie hordes, big decapitations, explosions, anything that's a big stunt or effect.
Now,
and then I have to get that done before they start shooting.
Do you also work with any of the visual effects people?
They work off of my stuff. I don't usually work with them directly, but they can't work without mine.
Okay, good. I did not know that. How the storyboard.
Yeah, Mark, if I could jump in and just say, Mark is sort of the invisible director, in my view.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I was in film school, I learned that this genius artist named Saul Bass actually storyboarded the shower scene in Psycho.
Wow.
And I remember it was more years ago than I like to think, but when I was in film school, I looked it up, I found it, and it blew me away. It was the exact shower scene, which, Hitchcock, I'm sure, he supervised him and, told him what he wanted. But it is amazing if you see Saul Bass's storyboards for that. And ever since then, I've just thought, well, the storyboard artist is, the unheralded director. Yeah. And I still feel that way today. And I've directed features myself. And I still feel that way, that the storyboard artist is, one of the critical links in especially in genre stuff that's very visual.
And
You know, the stuff that's
storyboarding,
very visual is
yeah,
critical. You know,
and storyboarding, Mark, is not a new concept. This has been from way, way back, from the beginning of film. People have been laying out on paper what the vision is before the camera comes out. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't really become known until Disney was doing it for his features because he was the first one to do animated features.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have dedicated story artists until relatively recently, 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. Before it was production illustrators. And then they would do the sketches like you were talking about Saul Bass. He was the production illustrator working under Hitchcock. And Hitchcock himself started as a story artist. So he knew what to do, and he did a lot of his own storyboards and rough sketches. And then the illustrators brought it to life and made it prettier. But a lot of our top directors started as story artists. And,
Mark, I'm
and
curious.
then they grow into it.
Can you when you watch a film or a TV show, can you tell whether it's heavily storyboarded or not just by watching it?
No, I really can't. Other than I just know if it's a big effects or stunt scene, I know that it was.
Yeah,
because it has to be. It's what you can tell is if you're working in production, if something is a major cluster and everyone's running around with their head cut off, they don't know what they're doing. Pretty much guarantee that wasn't storyboarded.
right.
Because if it's storyboarded early enough, everyone knows what they're doing. Like I said, it's the visual blueprint.
Right.
So it's in like a lot of low budget productions say, well, we can't afford a story artist, whereas the opposite is true. It's cheaper to hire a story artist than it is not to have one, because if you don't have a visual blueprint, you're going to have way too many miscommunications and missed opportunities and crew sitting around and waiting for someone to get something fixed or done that would have been brought up during the storyboarding process.
Okay.
So it's much cheaper to hire me than to have a crew sitting around at $10,000, $20,000 an hour waiting for something to get fixed or put together.
In the long run, it saves you money.
AMC owes you money.
Now, my question is,
I love that.
in the credits, you're not credited as a storyboarder. You're actually, what is it, graphic artist or graphics?
No, I'm storyboard artist. That's how it's listed.
Okay, that is how it's listed. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, Neil, have you been a horror fan your whole life?
You know, it's funny because I'm not really a horror fan. I am a zombie and post-apocalyptic fan. I am very, very niche in my tastes. And I think it came from when I was a kid, I was terrified of zombie movies. Like, not even just a kid. Like, I'm talking probably into my 20s. That was the only thing that scared me. Like, nothing else scared me. Jump scare movies or slasher, it didn't even interest me. But anything with zombie, I was absolutely terrified at. And you kind of embrace what does terrify you. And I remember actually in my life where the change occurred, where suddenly I started seeking out the genre to scare myself because it was the only thing. And I look very, very young and youthful, but I'm actually an old guy. And it wasn't that popular back when, there wasn't a lot. There was, Walking Dead was a graphic novel, which, was hard to find. And before that, there was Day by Day Armageddon and Dawn of the Dead. And those were not huge hits. You had to seek them out.
Well, Dawn of the Dead, the original, was a hit. I mean, now it's more noted than when it was when it first came out, as so many movies are. Like The Thing got completely trashed when it came out from John Carpenter. Now it's a classic.
It's absolutely cult. It's people.
And what happened was, in my opinion, I mean, zombies, when Romero was doing night, dawn, day, land, and then when he sort of stopped, and then, he passed away recently, the zombie genre sort of went to sleep. And it's The Walking Dead that revived it. Now, Jay, tell us about your experience meeting and working with the great George Romero.
He was a pussycat. He was a wonderful person. He was an old, stoner hippie from Pittsburgh, and he was so laid back. And his wife at the time, Christine, was the same way. And I stayed at his place when I was working on this script with him, and he taught me so much. I've always thought that zombies are different from all the other horror archetypes because they really were a creation of the visual medium of cinema. I often ask my friends in the literary field, in the book world, name the epic archetypal novel of zombies, and they really can't.
No.
They can't name a Dracula, or Turn of the Screw, or Frankenstein. Yeah, all the other horror archetypes. That's because it's a creation of the cinema, and really Romero created everything, all the raw materials we're still working with. I think Romero created. I see, and maybe Mark has distilled some of this stuff visually, but I sometimes see images, especially in Nicotero directed episodes, and of course Nicotero learned from Romero, like a lot of us. He was mentored
Tom
by
Savini, all of them.
Right, and Tom Savini. And but I just see images like this, the Romero stairs into the basement, which is to me one of the most chilling images. Those Dutch angle stairs into the basement, and you still see those. And really, the whole Bernie Wrightson, kind of zombie imagery, it all comes for me. It all comes from Romero.
Well, yeah, I mean, he is. There's no argument. He is the granddad of the modern day zombie, or you can argue the zombie in general. I mean, the fact that he was such a cool person and so fun to be around and everything. Because I thought he was going to be like Orson Welles. He was going to be a dick. And but. When I first met him at the airport, when I was going to work with him, he was lovely. He wanted to carry my suitcase. I was like, "Excuse me,
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy."
Oh, it's not going to carry my suitcase. And he just takes me out. He's got this old beat up Mercedes, and he throws it in the trunk, and he takes me out to his place. And his place was in Sanibel Island. He used to have this really beautiful
I've been there. It's beautiful.
Yeah, have you been there?
Oh yeah.
It's gorgeous, and it was just so much fun. It was so it was my first deal in the business. It was my first book in 1994 that he signed on to direct, and we never were able to. It was on the fast track for a while at New Line Cinema, but we were never able to get it to the screen. Yeah. And George always listed it as one of his. I was proud that he thought it was like one that got away, that he was bummed out.
What a cool story. Now, Mark, when it comes to the actual visual images that we see of the walkers in The Walking Dead, is there any input that is completely created in your mind, or is it straight coming from the director to you and you putting it on the screen?
It's a mix of things, because like I said, it's my goal to always get the director's vision down, but oftentimes the director hasn't thought of every shot, or there are times that they'll give me an idea of what they want, and then they go off to another meeting and say, all right, you break this down, or you figure something out. Like there was one episode I believe it was in season 10 of The Walking Dead. Nicotero was directing one of the episodes when the satellite comes down and falls in the forest and catches the whole forest on fire.
Mm-hmm.
So he was just going crazy with the amount of prep there was on that. And so we had talked about, we were going through one sequence when the fire brigade comes in and they start putting it out and they get surrounded by the walkers that are in the forest. And he said, all right, I got to go to this other meeting. I'll be back in a little bit, come up with at least 2 new ways to kill some walkers with the tools that they have here we've never seen before. and that's like, thank you!
Yeah!
What could be better than figuring out a new kill, right?
Got it.
So I did, and he came in and he said, "Yep, that's great, love it," and and we move on. So I'll watch episodes and I'll see shots of stuff like that. Now, what the walkers look like, that's all Greg. I mean, he's an amazing illustrator himself, and K&B Studios, his makeup effects, they do all the design and everything. Yeah. So then they'll send me illustrations or photos, so that because I always want my storyboards to look just like what their finished pieces look like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think Nicotero has become like an A director.
Oh yeah.
He's amazing.
He's brilliant. He is,
and he's fun to work with too. He's really fun to work with.
Sweet guy. I mean, it's kind of the Romero legacy, really.
Well, let's analyze 2 of the biggest Walking Dead directors, okay? And Michael Satrazemis and Greg Nicotero. Excellent directors. Right. Both are excellent.
Brilliant.
But you can tell who directed which episode. And I've had other people say this as well. Nicotero's episodes tend to lean more into the gore, while Satrazemis' episodes are much more character-based and driven.
Yeah, definitely.
2 different styles, both excellent.
But
and part of that comes down to where they come from. Yeah, because Mikey, starting in camera, he's all about the visual and the visual storytelling, whereas Nicotero is all about the gore having come up through the makeup and visual effects. So
exactly.
When you think about their background leading into it, it makes perfect sense. And look, Greg is just as much of a fan as we are. I mean, there are times when we're prepping things, Greg and I'll sit and watch old movies or old episodes of things, and then he'll start telling me stories about how this was done in Creepshow and how this was done in this. And, so, and he's just like we are talking about it, just fanboying out. Whereas Mikey is really to the point. And he really gets into it, and he said, all right, I want to start with this shot and then move to this shot and then move to this shot. So, their process is different, but that's also part of what makes it so much fun for me, because I never get bored. It's always fun. I love geeking out. I love the technicality of storytelling. I love every aspect of this. But then, drawing gore all the time, hard to beat.
It is. Who can ask for a better job? Now, Neil. Right. I have stated.
Who else is a huge fanboy?
Who?
Is Kirkman.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
I mean that's. I'm sure there's a clue there to the success of this, not only show and spin-offs, but the genre itself. Is the practitioners are all fans. They're all they all come from fandom.
And it's from the original source material, and that's straight from Kirkman and Adler,
And Neil, I think you tapped into that, directly, like a laser.
Now,
if they don't have the passion, it's going to show. The fans are going to be able to tell. I met Greg Nicotero, and I was shocked at how down to earth he is, and he was just a fan. I had a booth at a con. And he was walking around before the con opened. I luckily was there early setting up, and he just wanted to see the art and the displays and the T-shirts and all the stuff. And we ended up talking. He's just a very approachable guy who is a fan.
He's a horror fan. I mean, plain and simple. I mean, a lot of people don't even know that he was in Day of the Dead.
Right.
He was.
I told my wife, I'm like, see that dude, the stoner, the guy that's smoking weed over there in the corner? That's Nicotero.
Yeah. Now, Neil, I want to ask you a question. I have stated many times on this show that what really makes The Walking Dead such a great show is the characters, obviously. And the zombies are the backdrop to the character storytelling. You've described how zombies, you were afraid of them, and the way you confronted your fear is by pretty much working on them, writing books, and confronting it. Do you agree that it could be, I don't know, something else that caused the apocalypse, and to put the characters in the same situations, and for The Walking Dead to be as good and the zombies are just a backdrop? If not, I want to hear your opinion.
No, well, again, it comes down to that story and character driven content. If you don't have a good story, good characters, good content, you could have all the greatest special effects you want. It's not going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a zombie purist. I like slow moving, shambling zombies that just slowly creep up on you. I always felt that that's the creeping of death. It's eventually going to get you.
Right.
No matter what you do, no matter how much you prepare, you can stave it off for a while, but eventually it's going to get everybody. Now, I do also like the fast zombies, which I always really don't see as zombies. I always see them more as the infected, like 28 Days. I don't dislike those. I love them. Love them. Even the last remake of Dawn of the Dead, where the zombies are fast moving, and Black Summer. Holy cow! I am a huge fan of Black Summer, and that final episode of season 1,
Oh my
where
god!
all chaos breaks out. I won't give anything away.
Oh, I
But
think
that
we're
was
past the point of spoilers, but I'm going to cut you off for 1 second, and I've said this before. The way, if I want to get somebody to start watching Black Summer, is I just show them the finale of season 1. It's only 20 minutes long. Just show them that, and they'll get hooked.
directing like I have never seen. I don't care whether it's a zombie movie or not. Brilliant. And it shows that this is a genre where there can always be something new. Always something new. I have never seen anything like that before. That was everything I wanted to see in World War Z.
Yeah.
Honestly, that final episode of season 1. But now let's take it and put it into a different apocalypse. Whether it's a biological and people are just dead, or it's just economic collapse, and whatever. Insert your apocalyptic fantasy here. If you have the good characters, good storyline, and it's unique, people will love it. I'll love it. It doesn't have to be zombies.
Exactly.
Well, to your point on that, if you remember back when they were first launching The Walking Dead, in all the posters and promos and sizzles and everything, not one walker.
Yeah.
They never showed any zombies in any of the prep. It was all about the people, in the story of the people.
Now, Jay, do you agree that the success is that The Walking Dead has primarily stayed with that foundation throughout its now 11-year history?
Absolutely. I've always thought that not only are zombies different from other horror archetypes that they're a creation of the cinema, but they're part of the environment. They're part of they're not differentiated like Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, all these other archetypal horror icons have a personality. They're differentiated. Where zombies are like acid rain. Zombies are like coronavirus.
Yeah.
And so it enables storytellers to basically tell human stories that are character driven, and I think that's part of the success. I think that's part of the rise of the zombie apocalypse in our modern culture. They're really stories of survival. In fact, I think Kirkman, if I'm not mistaken, I have it around here somewhere, the original comic book said survival horror. He called it survival horror.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feeds into, everything that we fear. It's an enemy that looks exactly like us. In fact,
Right.
It could be someone that your parent, your child, your neighbor, that
Right.
suddenly within minutes is trying to kill you. It's the collapse of everything that you think is a safety net. It's the no one is coming for you syndrome, that there is no one that's going to save you and you are on your own, and everything is going to be a complex cascading event of medical, utilities, civil unrest. Everything is going to collapse, and pretty damn quick.
That's true.
I mean, Kirkman used to, tease me and, give me shit for being like the grad student. I would always go, well, the real deep subtext here is blah, blah, blah. And he hated that. He hated, Kirkman's this like brilliant autodidact from Kentucky. He's, I've always just been amazed at his ability to tell a story and to pull the rug out from under a reader. That is, to me, that's his true genius. He can pull the rug out from under you. You don't expect the thing to get, when you turn that page and there's a splash page of the zombies whispering to each other. That's classic Kirkman.
Yes.
He always knew how to, like, are you getting bored with this storyline? Are you getting bored with Negan? Turn the page.
Exactly.
And I saw it, up close, but that's the thing. I mean, it's when somebody dies, and I've lost some people in COVID, and I've thought about this a lot. I mentioned it to Kirkman years ago, and he didn't disagree. But he said, when somebody dies, that kills you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Jungian kind of subtext to that when somebody dies, it hurts so much, you die a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think I've always thought that the zombie mythology taps into that.
Yes.
Because you'll see a lot of scenes in many films and especially in The Walking Dead where someone we know and love has turned.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking.
It is. It touches, that's the human part of what the show's foundation is about. Now, I can tell you exactly in the TV show when I became a diehard fan. Now, a lot of the viewers that watch The Walking Dead today, they were too young to remember it when it came out in 2010. Right. It's brought along a brand new generation. Mm-hmm. Now, for the TV show, for me personally, when it cemented me becoming a diehard fan was the season 2 mid-season finale with Sophia coming out of that barn.
Yeah.
That was, for me, the big first shocker.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and I got into trouble because brilliant. The next day I showed it to my 3-year-old kid. My wife was not happy. My wife was not happy with me. I showed it to my little kids. I was so excited. I'm like, look at this. This is so awesome.
They could handle it. It wasn't horror porn.
No.
It was character driven horror.
Exactly. It was Shane. It was Rick.
There's different elements to it too, because I was hooked from the very first episode because the storytelling characters in the first episode in the pilot was amazing. But where I went, oh my God, this is so freaking cool, was the Well Walker. When that got ripped in half. The visual, it's almost visual comedy. It was so gross.
Yeah.
That was when I thought, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen on TV. So it went from great storytelling to just awesomely cool on that one image.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fantastic game, a parlor game to play, because when I became hooked was the first issue of the comic book, and the sheriff wakes up from his coma, and all he can think about in the comic, and if you go back and check this out, it's true. All he can think about is finding his family.
Yeah.
And he finds a horse, and he heads back home to find his family, and he starts thinking about his son's difficult labor that almost killed his wife.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was reading the comic book, I was like, wow, this is like Cassavetes.
Yeah, and this is supposed to be a zombie. Like, reading that and you're like, wow, this is a zombie story? Exactly. Now, Neil, when did you, in the TV show, Was there a moment that really cemented you as a diehard fan of The Walking Dead?
I would say there's a couple moments, and there's a couple moments where I may have started to fade, and it re-energized my love. In the first scene when he finally arrives in Atlanta, I've watched that so many times of him on horseback going through the destroyed city of Atlanta, and you see that what had occurred, and it's telling a story of the soldiers in the barricades that were overrun, and you can't quite know what the hell happened, but something bad went down there until he finally gets to that one corner, and that they've all kind of congregated for some reason. They've never actually explained that. I thought there was going to be some sort of callback as to, like a flashback as to why all the walkers got herded into that one block, but that was it. You know, that and then that final Glenn at the last minute saying, "Hey, you comfy in there?"
Yeah, he was like, "Hey, dumbass," or something like that.
I remember when the series first started, how my heart would start racing at the music, at the beginning and the end. And it, you know, and then I would say later, when I was kind of fading on it, the governor came in, and his arc, the story arc of the governor, not the book Governor, but the television series Governor, was just so brilliant. And especially after he had lost everything and been stripped away, and then he gets into that family, and then he gets into the community, and suddenly he just reverts back to what he is in his core. Like, you thought, oh man, this guy's totally changed, and it was just so natural how they did it, as to he comes back and eventually he's the governor again.
Exactly.
There's no getting away from that.
Now, Jay, you've written books on the governor and Woodbury. David Morrissey portrayal of the governor, I mean, brilliant. And to this day, and I don't think he will ever be topped, he is by far the most evil antagonist on the show. Do you agree?
I agree, and I think it's because he's the most three-dimensional. He's the most human. That's what makes him so scary.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, Robert has talked about that many times. I've talked to Robert about that. You know, it's sort of like he's the negative image of the the Andrew Lincoln character who basically goes toward the moral side and tries to do the right thing, and they're both doing it for the same reasons. One guy's doing maybe evil things for the right reasons, and the other guy's doing good things for the right reasons, but they're both doing it for the right reasons. And, I've talked to David Morrissey about that. He's like, well, you never consider yourself evil when you're playing a heavy. You always have your reasons.
Exactly.
You know why you're doing it. He's protecting his community.
Yeah, to him it makes perfect sense. Everything he's doing it makes perfect sense.
And like his followers, they, the people that follow Negan know he's an evil guy in the beginning. They know he's evil, but they're following him for the protection. Right. But the governor, the people that were following him, they had no idea.
No.
To him, he was the guy that helped them out, that's given them a community and safety, and they weren't looking at him saying, we know this guy is pure evil. Yeah. But he's keeping us safe. They didn't know.
No, he'll shake your hand and stab you in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Kirkman, again, I'm done with my contract with him, so I don't need to, blow smoke up his ass anymore. But I have to say, I learned so much from him. And also, his this just grace note of having a villain who's unable to kill his daughter who has turned. He can't bring himself to do it.
Yeah.
That made him so understandable to everybody. Everybody got that. And in the show, I thought it was brilliant. and Mark might have been part of this, but when when Michonne finally puts the girl down, the sound that comes out of David Morrissey, the agony
Do you
is
think
unbelievable. I've never heard anything like it in my life.
do you think that moment when Michonne killed Penny, I believe her name was Penny,
Hmm.
you think it took him to a new level of insanity, for lack of a better term?
That's a great way to look at it. I agree. I think that's what happened. I think, that's what happened. That was David Morrissey's sort of motivation. That
Yeah,
was his central, this is what's happening now. Yeah,
yeah, I
definitely.
agree. That took him to a
Yeah.
whole new level. Now, Mark, over the years with The Walking Dead, what would you note has been, besides the budget, it growing and growing and it becoming this huge franchise, some of the biggest differences that you've seen over the years happen?
I've been in with the whole franchise for about 3.5 years, and it's really just where the storylines are going. The budgets really haven't changed that much from at least anything that's affected me. Um, we're getting a lot of new directors that we
Mm-hmm.
hadn't had before.
Yeah.
Over the last number of years, they've also changed where now it's 50% men and 50% women.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always women execs on the show that are running everything. So but now that it's equal, it's affected the storylines to some degree, which I think is better. It's not
Yeah.
all just a macho way of
Yeah.
looking at
Right.
it. It's much more even and balanced across the board. We've got a woman showrunner
Angela is
on
doing an
the
amazing
main
And
show.
job.
Angela's
Yeah, I think
also
she's
a
doing
brilliant,
incredible.
brilliant showrunner.
And then every season, like on The Walking Dead, on season 10, the lookbook that we got on that was really wanting to go more towards a western again. So the imagery was very western-esque, and some David Lean images, some
Yeah.
wide expanse landscape type things. That was to put together to help all the directors kind of have a somewhat consistent look. Because every episode we have a different director,
Yeah.
whereas there's returning directors, mostly Mikey and Nicotero. They do the most episodes
Mm-hmm.
every season, which doesn't leave a whole lot of room for other new men coming in. Because
Yeah.
then, if they do 4 each or 4 or 5 each, that only leaves 3 other
Right.
men, and then it's all the other ones are all women. Um, but I like how it balances out nicely when we have so much female influence now.
Now you're
Yeah.
currently working on Fear, correct?
Yeah.
Do you have to physically be in Texas, or can you do everything remotely?
No, I've actually never been to the set in Texas. I was
Okay.
due to go out there this summer, but COVID screwed everything
Oh
up
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It turned
but
everything upside down.
I helped kind of pioneer long distance storyboarding over a decade ago. So
Awesome.
for me, it's second nature, and it's not much different than what we're doing right here.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of looking at me, I just share my digital screen.
Yeah.
So as I'm drawing, they're seeing it just
Right.
as if they were sitting right over my shoulder.
Wow.
Yeah.
I gotta say,
Great.
Mark, you have a cool ass job.
Oh, it is cool. It is fun. I get to draw every day and see the things I love the most show up on the big screen.
I know. That's
Later
just
on, so.
so awesome. Guys, this hour has flown by. Just quickly.
Hour already?
Yeah, it's almost there. We got to start saying goodbye. Neil, just tell the viewers the name of your book so they know what to look for.
Absolutely. You can find me at businessisdead.com or at Exit Zero Zombie, and that's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everything at Exit Zero Zombie. The trilogy was called Exit Zero, and then the nonfiction was called Business is Dead: Resurrecting Entrepreneurship.
Exactly. Cool.
Nice.
And Jay, you have a lot of books too, and you said Road to Woodbury is the one that you're most proud of. What comes in second place for you?
Well, the what I'm it's always like what you're working on presently, but but I have the amazing honor of working on one of Stan Lee's
Mm,
uh, unpublished superhero treatments,
yeah.
and his agent after he passed away. Well, it was before he passed away. He approved me as the co-writer, co-author of it, and he was looking to start this particular idea in prose in a book. So, and then months later he passed, and it
Oh,
was
yeah.
it was unbelievable. I thought it was dead, and his agent's like, no, 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 we're still going to do this. In fact, it's more valuable now than ever. So I'm happy to say that the first book in the series, it's called The Devil's Quintet. It's called Stan Lee's The Devil's Quintet,
I mean,
and it comes out in January from Macmillan, from Tor Books, and I'm working on book 2 right now,
wow.
and it's
You've
it's
had the
fantastic.
honor of working with such, geniuses. I mean, Stan
That's
Lee
awesome.
I
is
went from
to
Kurt to Stan
superheroes
Lee.
and comics what Romero is to zombies, you
Right,
know?
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly,
And Mark,
exactly.
you're gonna continue. You're working through right now. Is your main focus in your work just on Fear the Walking Dead, or are you doing multiple projects?
No, I'm doing multiple projects. I just wrapped up the new season of Dexter
Okay,
that comes out in November, and I've also been working on the new Vampire Academy TV series.
Cool.
And there's another superhero show called Naomi that I started earlier today. So there's always a lot of different shows that
you're
I'm
a
working
busy
on.
guy.
Yeah, and then I produce a lot of courses on storyboarding for LinkedIn Learning. And this is my latest book. Is this? It's a memoir of my own horror story when I was attacked, and my bullies followed me home and then attacked my entire family.
Oh wow,
And I
Wow.
became the first person in the country to hold parents responsible for the actions of their kids. So I had the families
awesome,
of my
awesome.
bullies arrested and thrown in jail.
Good,
So it's
good,
it's
Wow.
that whole story of what I went through.
good. That definitely sounds interesting and a must
Fantastic.
read. Guys, thank you so much to Jay, Mark, Neil. This has been an awesome hour. It has
Thank
flown
you.
by. I had a lot of fun talking about, our show, The Walking Dead, one of the
Walking Dead.
shows that we all love. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of our viewers for tuning in. And until next time, stay walking. Good night, everybody.